Hey everybody, this is Ron K. Kaufman, and welcome to You've Got Some Nervous System. And we're going to talk about today, we do this particular thing once a month, which is called the emotion of the month. And each month focuses on a different emotion. Until we run out of emotions, then there's going to be no more emotion of the month. But this one is all about anger. This one is all about anger. We're going to talk about what anger is, where it comes from, what's the best thing to do with your anger, how do we handle anger, all of that. And let's go. Let's jump right in, people. First thing to realize before we even dive into the specifics of anger is to talk about this idea, which is that every unhappy emotion that we feel, every emotion, actually, any kind, but specifically what I'm about to say is true for unhappy emotions, which is an unhappy emotion is a message from your nervous system that something's out of whack and there's something you need to do, have, or pay attention to get back in sync. That's what every unhappy emotion, so whether it's fear, anger, sadness, etc., it's telling us that. Now, in a way, this is good news, but it's also can be a little bit of a shock for some people because so often in our culture and so often in even in psychological approaches, we're taught that emotions are something, especially unhappy emotions, right, are something that we have to, sort of get past and, put behind us. And, you have an unhappy emotion, best thing to do is get through that, right? Think about it a different way so you don't feel that way or whatever that takes, right? And this means that what we were just talking about, this means that any emotion that we have is a message from your nervous system, and it actually needs to be heard, needs to be received, which means it needs to be fully felt. It needs to be fully felt, not just something to be gotten through, but deeply paid attention to and felt. In fact, if we don't fully feel it, if we're busy trying to tune it out or avoid it or quickly move past it or anything like that, then it doesn't actually go away when we do that. It just burrows inside. But what happens is your nervous system is just trying to take care of you. It's just trying to help you survive and be healthy and be okay. It's constantly sending you messages and it's receiving messages. It's receiving, it's sending, it's receiving. It's a bi-directional system here. But what happens is if it sends you a message about anything, but in particular, let's say an emotion in this case, then what that means is if you tune it out or avoid it or don't fully feel it, then it has no choice. Basically, one of two things happen. The normal thing that usually happens is it has no choice but to then turn up the volume. It has to turn up the volume of the thing that's not being received so that the message can be received, right? And in fact, if you fully receive it, oftentimes then it either turns down the volume or sometimes even the emotion can move right through you. Because emotions are meant to be fully felt, but they're not necessarily meant to be lingered in like forever, that one particular emotion. But we're emotional beings. We're designed to be able to feel every single emotion. We're designed to feel every single emotion. And when we fully feel those, the nervous system can calm down because it knows the message has been received. And it's really, really important for mental and emotional health. Right. Now, people are afraid of unhappy emotions. People don't like their unhappy emotions. In fact, many families have one or two emotions that are, I like to call forbidden emotions, which means you're sort of in the family. It's not okay to feel or express that particular emotion or those particular two emotions. Often anger is one of them. Not always. Actually, some families predominantly express themselves through anger. But other families kind of ban anger. You're not supposed to feel or certainly express anger. So it varies. That can vary. But it is important to understand this key piece of even an emotion like anger is not an emotion to be stamped out. Right? Now, people get worried because they think that means we're saying to be run around being a really angry person, express lots of anger and yell at people. So we're not saying that either. I'll sort of parse that out for you. But first thing to understand is that we have some ideas about anger that comes from all different places, family background, trauma responses, cultural norms. But we have some ideas about anger that actually fuel anger. Now, like I said, there is nothing wrong with anger. Anger needs to be felt. But that doesn't actually mean, like, look, you've noticed this about people, right? Some people get angry more easily than others. Some people stay angry for longer than others, right? So there's lots of different ways that people process, express, deal with anger. There are particular ideas that some of us have about anger, many of us in our culture, that tend to fuel more anger than we actually, than is necessary. And again, there's not some exact amount of anger that you're supposed to feel or not feel. There's no such thing as inappropriate anger. You're not supposed to feel nothing like that. But sometimes we have ways of seeing our emotions, in particular ways of seeing anger, that actually fuel more of it. So let's talk about that. There's 4 that I want to talk about. One is that anger shows we care. Anger shows we care, and if we don't get angry and show anger, it means we don't care. Or if someone else doesn't get angry or show anger, it means they don't care. And this is pretty darn popular. I see it in the culture. I see it a lot, believe it or not, in politics. Oftentimes, different candidates for different offices will either show anger as a way to show they care, and people tend to like that. Or sometimes, if a politician does not show anger about something, people decide that means that politician doesn't care about that thing. That's not always true, right? We also do this with our relatives and our friends. If what we deem the proper amount of anger is not shown, it means they don't care. And then here's how it fuels anger in ourselves. If we feel like we must feel or express anger to show that we care, then it fuels anger where we actually wouldn't necessarily feel it if we didn't think we had to do it to show caring. So that's one of the things, one of the ideas about anger that fuels anger. And I said I'm going to do 4. That's number 1. Number 2 is this is a really popular one in our culture. Holy free holies. And it is anger is powerful, and it's a display of power. It's just huge. This is why people, especially right now in our culture, are very drawn to displays of anger, because we have this idea that anger is powerful and that anger is a display of power. It isn't, interestingly enough. It's usually, interestingly enough, it's actually, rather than a display of power, it's a request for power by someone who feels powerless. That's the deeper thing of what anger actually is. But somehow in our culture, not all cultures operate this way, but in our culture, we've come to this idea that anger is powerful. It's a display of power. Anyway, it's okay if you believe that, but doing that is going to fuel more creations of anger, even in situations where, again, if you didn't have that idea, you might not actually feel angry. Okay, number 3 this is the 3rd idea about anger that fuels anger, and that is anger is how you express that you want something different. This is true in a lot of families, actually, that grow up with anger being a main way of expressing thoughts and ideas. And so some of us, this is definitely not all of us, even in this culture, this one's not as popular as the first 2, but definitely how you express that you want something different can be a way that we see anger. Like you get anger, you show anger, and that's how you show that you're trying to get someone to be different, you're trying to get something to be different. 4th one, this is one that's very popular as well. An injustice has occurred, and anger is how we respond to injustice. Now, anger can be a way that we respond. Again, I would never say that anger is like an improper response to that, but anger isn't the way to respond to perceived injustice. It's a way to respond to perceived injustice. And that's a really big difference, because if we see it as a way, then fair enough. You can feel angry. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But it's not the only possible response if we perceive an injustice. There's also probably another discussion, not for today, about perceiving injustice and what we decide is injustice or not. So that's a subjective idea in our heads. But that's less important than the idea that if you do perceive an injustice, the way to respond is anger, versus that being one way to respond. Okay, so those are ideas about anger that fuel anger. There's also ideas we have about anger. These are just as detrimental. These might even be more detrimental. These are ideas we have about anger that contribute to our suppressing our anger. Yeah, suppressing that. Right? This is the absolute worst thing you can do. This is a big part of my work. It's a big part of my colleague Kate C. Wild's work. It's a huge part of our work is helping people to get in touch with rather than suppress their own emotions. And a lot of people, look, some people don't suppress their anger. Awesome. That's terrific. But a lot of us do suppress their anger. I spent a lot of my life feeling like I shouldn't be angry. It's not good to be angry. Angry is a bad emotion to feel or express. And thus I would suppress anger, frustration, that kind of stuff. So let's talk about that. Again, I want to reiterate, the last thing we want to do is suppress anger, because remember what we talked about before. Anger, like all unhappy emotions, these are a message from your nervous system that's telling you that something's out of whack. And there's something that you have to do, have, or pay attention to get back in whack or in sync, right? So this is what we want to think about. So here's these ideas that, and one other thing. If we suppress our anger, right, remember what happens from that, right? Which is your nervous system has to raise the volume on it. It has to raise the volume on the signal because it's not being received, right? So here's the ideas. These are actually 5 of these. One is that anger is dangerous. Okay. A second one is, I'm going to explain this a bit, but second one is anger is violent. It kind of goes together with being dangerous. I definitely used to believe both those things. Anger is dangerous, anger is violent. Anger is uncouth or uneducated, right? That's something that some of us believe. Anger is inappropriate, especially for certain situations. Again, this is not what I believe, but these are ideas that some of us have. And anger is disrespectful. Anger is disrespectful, especially if directed towards certain people, right? Especially, you can't be angry at your elders, for instance. That's highly disrespectful. Can't be angry at your parents, right? So all of these are 5 different ideas about anger that contribute to our suppressing our own anger. But I want to talk a little bit about them before I move on, because this goes to a really key idea about how our emotions work, and in particular, how anger works, and some misconceptions we have about it. We have this idea that to fully feel anger involves acting a certain way. So fully feeling anger means punching a wall. It means raising our voice or yelling at someone or saying, "Oh, I'm angry," or acting a certain way, right? I had just to give you 2 examples of how anger manifests like this is 2 people that I worked with. One of whom was taking care of her mother, who was abusive to her when she was younger, and now her mother was suffering from Alzheimer's, and she was taking care of her mother. And she asked me in our session, she said, "How do I not be angry? How do I not feel angry at my mother?" Right? And she was really trying to be self-reflective and trying to help herself and be respectful to her mother, right? How do I not be angry at my mother? And so I asked her, I said, actually, I have an interesting question for you. What if we flip that question around and ask a different question, which is, how do you feel angry at your mother first? Let's look at that first. How do you actually feel angry at your mother? Because she was so busy trying to figure out, basically, how do I stamp out and not have this anger? And it was leading her to step on her anger, to not allow herself, which wasn't making it go away. Clearly, that's why we were talking about it. She'd had it for a long time, right? So stepping on it after years and years of that was not making the anger magically disappear. And so now she was feeling like, I'm not even supposed to feel anger. I'm taking care of my elderly mother who has Alzheimer's, doesn't even remember the abuse that she committed. So she was making all kinds of judgments about her own anger. And she was believing she had to stamp it out. But really the question for her was, how do I first, I'm not saying forever, but how first do I feel angry toward my mom? Now, one of her concerns about that is, if I feel that way, though, then I'm going to mistreat my mother. If I really fully feel, allow myself to just fully let that flow through me, express it, I'm going to treat my mother not well. I had another woman that I was working with, totally different. And she was actually also, interestingly enough, also angry at her mother, but her mother was alive and not elderly. And she got really, really angry. Her mother was really coming at her verbally in a particular way. So she was feeling very, very upset, and she really wanted to almost like shut this down, and she was really upset. So she smashed a dish. This is the daughter, the adult daughter that I was working with. She smashed a dish, right? And by the way, her mom did immediately, it was so jarring that her mom did back off and stop, yelling and stuff. And she was saying to me, though, the daughter that I was working with, I don't want to do that anymore. So how do I not be angry like that in those situations with my mom where she's yelling at me and coming at me? How do I not be angry? Because I don't want to break a dish like that again. As if it was the anger that was making her break the dish. Right? So one of the things we want to do, and this is why anger is not dangerous, anger is not violent, anger is not even disrespectful, is because anger is a feeling. Anger is not an action. An action is an action, right? Anger is not an action, an action is an action. So we want to be aware of that. This is how this works, that what you do is completely different than how you feel. I want to say that part again. This part is really important. What you do is completely different than how you feel. So if we were going to, let's say you were going to say to yourself, I want to fully feel my anger. That doesn't actually pair together. I know you think it does, but it doesn't actually pair together with yelling at someone, breaking a dish, whatever, right? Slamming a door. That you could do that. Many people do that when they're angry. I'm not saying people don't do it when they're angry. They do. But that doesn't mean that's what the anger is. In fact, here's a secret. This is going to blow your circuits a little bit, okay? Think about this. Ready? Most of the actions that we associate with expressions of anger, actually part of the anger, most of those actions are not expressions of the anger. They are attempts to suppress the anger. Most of the things that we think are expressions of anger are actually attempts to get rid of our anger. So for instance, if you bark at someone and bite their head off, metaphorically, right? Don't stop saying that to me. I'm not okay with that, right? And you raise your voice and you do this. That's not the expression of the anger in most cases. What that actually is you're feeling angry. You are desperately trying not to feel angry. So you are biting the person's head off so that they stop, back off what they're doing, stop what they're doing, so you can stop being angry. So it's another attempt to get away from the anger, not feel the anger, right? So that's the key. What you do is different than what you feel. So you can be angry and you can yell and scream. I'm not saying you can't. Of course you can. People do it all the time. You can be angry and yell and scream. You can also be equally angry and not yell and scream. Yeah, it's true. Why? Because anger is a feeling. Anger is a feeling. Anger is something that it's a message from your nervous system, and then it's something that you feel in your body. Okay? So let's say you're only partially feeling it. Then you're partially pushing the anger away. You're stepping on it. Let's say you then decide to fully feel it, which admittedly can be hard. I'm not claiming it's easy for people because you're feeling something that's uncomfortable and unpleasant to feel. And when you first feel it, it'll increase because you're letting it in and you're fully feeling it. A lot of people don't like that. If you can stay with it though, oftentimes it will do the opposite. It'll get bigger at first for the first 2-3 minutes if you really feel it. And then you'll see it start to go back down this way. It's really interesting if you allow it. Now, if you're doing that, and I'll talk about exactly how a little bit later in this talk, but if you're doing that, then you're fully feeling the feeling. Again, I'll talk about the specifics of that in a second, but the thing you want to be aware of is you're fully feeling the feeling. And you'll notice fully feeling it does not now make you go out and punch someone, right? It gives you a feeling in your body. It doesn't actually make you do certain things, right? It doesn't make your arms move in a way you don't want them to move so that you go break something, right? So think about this. This is incredibly powerful idea once you really get it and understand it, right? So that means anger is not dangerous. Anger is not violent. Some people are violent. Some people commit violence. Some people commit violence when they're angry. But that's not their anger committing the violence, right? They could be just as angry without being violent. People do that all the time, right? So we want to be aware of that. The violence, again, coming back to this, often comes from an attempt to suppress and get rid of the anger, to sort of satisfy and reverse the anger in some way. That's why they're doing it on someone, to try and get something, to try and solve something inside of them, not to try and fully feel it. That's not what's going on when someone's doing that. Right? And one last thing I'll just tell you. So, because some people may say, So what do I do so then are you saying I'm just supposed to feel the anger, but never, what if I want to confront someone or talk to someone who's treating me in a way I don't want to be treated and I am angry about it? I promise you we're going to cover that today in a few minutes, actually. But just this is what I want to leave you to think about. There is absolutely a way to confront or discuss or address with another person who's doing something you don't like when you're angry. There is a way to do that. And it doesn't entail suppressing your anger and getting super comfortable first in yourself before you're allowed to talk to them. Doesn't involve that. Also doesn't involve yelling and screaming. Certainly not committing violence either. Okay, so let's do that. Now, one other thing I just want to say about anger that's just interesting to be aware of about anger that's different than some of the other emotions that we feel, which is anger can often be used, not always, I'm not saying this is always true, but it can often be used as a covering emotion, meaning it's designed to actually cover or overlay a deeper, different emotion. It can be used, for instance, to cover over fear. A lot of people who are angry, when they're really feeling intense anger, a lot of times underneath that is fear. So that's one. Another one, this one's really popular. I think this will ring true for many of you. Hurt. A lot of times if people feel hurt, they will then be angry. But angry is the secondary emotion. It's not the initial emotion. The initial emotion is they felt hurt. And then they cover that over with anger because why? Why do they do that? This is what I was meaning earlier when I said we have some ideas about anger that then fuel more anger. So if anger is powerful and is a display of power and we feel hurt, we will then often cover over the emotion of hurt with anger. So, but if we didn't believe that that anger was an expression of power, and we really understood that anger is a display of power by someone who's feeling powerless, we would then just feel hurt. Not that it feels great to feel hurt. Nobody likes feeling hurt, but we would then feel hurt, and instead of hurt plus then a whole bunch of anger, right? Okay, two more. Another one is guilt or shame. I'm putting those in the same category. They're slightly different, but they're similar. So oftentimes anger can be a covering over if someone feels guilt or shame. They'll put the anger on top of it. And then lastly, and this might surprise some of you, but I've seen it many times with people I've worked with, is grief, believe it or not. Anger can be a covering of grief. And do you know what's interesting about that? When I have worked with people who cover over their grief with anger, and not everybody does. In fact, many people do not do this. But when I've worked with people that do, they tend to be the people who it's like the grief, the event that precipitated the grief. It's like it happened yesterday. I worked with someone whose mother had died about 6 years earlier. And the way she was very angry about it. She was angry about the death. She was angry about how some people handled it. And so for her, in the discussions we were having, it was like it happened yesterday. It was like it happened yesterday, right? I just realized I've now told 3 stories of mothers and daughters. Sorry that it's skewed so much that way in this discussion, but these are just the stories that are coming to mind for me. Obviously, I've worked with tons of men who've also experienced this, and men and mothers and men and fathers and daughters and friends and husbands and wives and husbands and all different kinds of people, right? But I really have noticed this a lot. When someone overlays the grief with anger, it often holds the grief in place, and then years later they're in the same place that they were, the same place they were 2 days after the initial death. If it's death that they're grieving over, I'm just using that as an example. So it's interesting. This could apply to for a breakup. If you're having grief over a breakup, if you're very angry about it, oftentimes it'll hold the grief in place. If you're just grieving, then you can actually go through the grief, and it's not something that stays in place forever. So something to think about. Anger is often a covering emotion. Okay. By the way, they've done some research that says, people often think that venting anger automatically makes it disappear. And I just want to say they have done some peer-reviewed published research that shows that the expression alone like that, like venting the anger, venting it verbally, going and punching a pillow, actually does not solve the issue, doesn't take care of the whatever the underlying trigger was, and actually aggressive expression will often strengthen the anger. This is what the research was shown, and it doesn't surprise me because when you are acting to suppress it, which is part of what those aggressive expressions are, you're going to have some bounce back. So yeah, that makes sense. Okay, just a quick note on the biology of anger, and that is, people. You may have heard the amygdala. It's part of the sort of almond-shaped piece of the brain, not piece, region of the brain. There, piece of the brain, and it's often associated with fear. But just to note that the amygdala is often the initial thing that's triggered when someone is angry, and then the prefrontal cortex then makes decisions about how to respond. So that goes back to my original point. You have the initial burst of anger, the initial thing that's happening in the brain, and then a different part of your brain decides how to respond, right? Unfortunately, sometimes it decides to respond in a suppressive manner to the anger, or it might respond in an aggressive way, a lot of different ways, but it's two different things, and that's why the feeling what the anger is really different than what your action is. Okay, now, here is the thing to consider about this, which is that anger is a signal. It's not a command. Anger is a signal. It's not a command. I say this because a lot of people feel like anger is a command. They feel like if I'm angry, I must do something. But it isn't. Anger, remember, anger is just a feeling. It's just a feeling. It's not a command, right? The command actually truly comes from the desire not to feel the anger. If you were okay sitting with the anger, like actually sitting with the emotion and feeling it, number one, you're going to see it's not so bad. It's just a feeling. It's not going to kill you. Also, you're going to see that you can sit with it and you'll be okay. And that also allows it to be fully felt and flow through you. It changes your nervous system reaction, so it's not raising the volume. It can tell you, anger can tell you that something matters. It can tell you that something feels off. It can tell you that some need that you have is being violated. It can tell you all those things, but it does not determine what you do next, right? That's up to you. That's up to your prefrontal cortex. Okay, last piece of this little discussion here, my people. And that is, so what do you do with your anger? Okay, what do you actually do with it? First of all, we start from the point of view of, which I said at the beginning, there is absolutely nothing wrong with feeling the emotion of anger. Nothing wrong with that. 0, 0, 0. And there's no bad reason to be angry either. Like, oh, that's a good reason to be angry. This is a bad reason to be angry. They're all emotions. They're all designed to be felt. We all feel emotions differently and in different circumstances, although there's commonalities as well. And there's nothing wrong with feeling angry. So what you don't want to do is like judge yourself for feeling angry, beat yourself up for feeling angry. Hopefully, if possible, not judge other people for feeling angry, right? Not try to suppress other people's anger as well, right? The more you're acquainted with this emotion, the less it feels threatening to you. So not only then you don't suppress your own anger, but you don't feel intimidated or have a desire to suppress other people's anger. Because also for them, it's just an emotion, right? It doesn't do anything besides just being an emotion. Right? So you want to be aware of that. And we're entitled, not just entitled, but we're built to feel our emotions. It's quite healthy to feel our emotions. Okay, remember, anger, like other unhappy emotions, is a message from your nervous system. And so that means we're going to, if you're willing to go with me here, that means fully feeling the anger. Okay, now, by the way, I do want to just do a quick disclaimer here. There are some rare exceptions to this. If you have like certain diagnosed mental, emotional, like if you have a certain mental diagnosis, particular mental illness diagnosis, then follow what your doctor or your therapist says. And if they're telling you not to do this, if they're telling you not to fully feel it because there's going to be consequences to that, or I would follow that. This message is for people who don't have a specific diagnosed mental illness that they have a specific, treatment 4. But let me go back to this. So we're going to then fully feel it. We're going to fully feel it. Now, what does that mean? What does it even mean to fully feel it? Like, okay, fully feel my anger. What does that mean? You just said it's not about punching a wall. It's not about yelling and screaming. How the heck do I fully feel it? It's a fair question, my people. It's a fair question. Okay, so it doesn't have anything to do with your actions. It has to do with what you're feeling. So it has to do with tuning in. What that means is if you notice you're feeling angry, if you can, this would be amazing if you could do this, step away, even if it's into a bathroom, spend just 5 minutes, if you can, something like that, by yourself. And what you're going to do is you're going to tune in, and you're going to close your eyes, actually, if you can. You're going to close your eyes, and you're going to tune in, and you're going to say, okay, you're going to say it to yourself first, like, I'm feeling really angry right now. It's helpful to even say that. This is anger that I'm feeling. Okay, next is you're going to tune into where do you feel it? Do you feel it in your stomach? Do you feel it in your solar plexus? Feel it in your chest? Do you feel it in your throat? Do you feel it somewhere else? Right? And by the way, there is no wrong answer to that. Every answer is right because it's where you actually feel it. So don't worry about it. You're not going to it's not like you're supposed to feel anger in your chest, but not your stomach. Wherever you feel it, that's where it is. That's where you're feeling it. So then you're going to notice it. You're going to feel it, and you're going to just tune into it. Like, okay, let's say you feel it in your stomach. What does it feel like in your stomach? Does it feel like a clenching? Does it feel like a pounding? Right? So just notice it. Does it have a color? Does it feel like bright red? Does it feel black? Does it feel purple? I've had people say all those colors and more, right? What is it? What's the texture? Does it feel pointy? Does it feel rough like sandpaper? So you're just going to this is all about paying attention. This is about tuning in. And you're just going to sit with that for a little bit. First of all, you're going to notice some fascinating things. Like sometimes it's going to move around. Sometimes it will get bigger and then get much smaller. Sometimes it will completely dissipate just from doing that. Really, quite often it will do that. Not always, but it will sometimes do that. And it's very powerful. But even if it doesn't totally dissipate, you're going to get a feeling for it. You're also going to start to feel like, okay, number one, this emotion isn't all of me. And 2, it's not terrible. It feels uncomfortable. Doesn't feel good. But it's also, okay, I can live with this feeling. It's just a feeling. It's just a feeling. It's just a feeling, right? It's okay to have a feeling, right? We all have feelings. It's okay to have a feeling. It's not going to hurt you. It's just a feeling, right? And now one last thing I'll tell you to do. This is if you want to take action. Let's say, okay, so now I felt it. Maybe I feel a little better. Maybe I don't. But let's say you say this to me. I'm still in a situation where someone's treating me in a way I don't want to be treated, or they did treat me in a way I didn't want to be treated. Maybe it's the person I'm married to, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a coworker, but I feel like I don't only want to just feel the anger and not say anything about it. That's totally fair. That's totally fair. Here's a suggestion though, if you want, on how you can actually address your anger with the other person who you feel like has mistreated you without doing one of these raise your voice, be aggressive, which remember is really all about, in most cases, you trying to suppress the anger. You're trying to get the person to back down so you can not feel angry. Right? This is different. This is just, I'm going to express that I'm angry to this person. And remember, expressing your anger to them does not mean they must do something differently. They must change. They must acknowledge. Because remember, it would be nice if they did all those things, but you don't have control over that. Right? You don't have control over that. And trying to control something that you don't and will never have any control over only leads to deep emotional distress. I've never seen it lead to anything other than that. I've never seen it make anyone happier, calmer, or feel better when they try to control something that can't be controlled. So here's what you do. If you want to follow this way of doing it, you tell the person how you feel or how you felt if it was yesterday and you don't feel that way anymore. But either way, either how you felt yesterday or how you feel right now, if it's angry, let's say, and you express it to them by telling them, hey, when you called me that name in front of this group of people that we were all hanging out with, I just want you to know that I didn't like it and I got really angry when you did that. I got really angry when you did it, and I'm still feeling really angry at you about it. I'm really upset about it. I'm really pissed off. I just want you to know that's where I'm coming from with that. And then if you want to say, I don't ever want you to do that again, you could say that if you want to. But the important piece to understand is the expression of the anger is telling the person that you were or are angry. That's the expression of it. The expression isn't the yelling, right? The expression is the communicating that you were or still feel angry. Try this. See what happens from it. See how you feel about it. See what it does to your interpersonal communication with the other person. I'd be curious to hear about it. If you have any experiences with that or comments, questions, feel free to comment below. So glad to have you guys today. So glad you were able to tune into this. I hope this was helpful for you. And we are going to do another emotion next month.